Thank you. This is a meeting of the Joint Compliance Audit Committee. Calling the meeting to order. Members present are Kelly Gravel, Paul Jones, and myself, Mark Anaj, Chair. Disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflict of interest among the members? And myself, none. Matter of business. Committee's opening statement. It's the meeting to determine the issue raised in the city clerk's report dated May 9th, 2023, regarding contributions to candidates and specifically Mr. Jason Kaplan. We have a presentation by Stephen Cook, city clerk. We have a written document. Would you like to supplement that, Mr. Huyuk, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. It's Mr. Hike, just so you're aware.
Mr. Hike, thank you.
That. If I could just request that the clerk's team to bring up my presentation. Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the Joint Compliance Audit Committee, I'm here before you today to present an overview of my report to the committee on an apparent overcontribution. Next slide, please. So by way of background for the committee, but also for any members of the public who may be joining us via live stream, Section 8834 of the Municipal Elections Act requires me as the clerk to review candidate financial statements to determine if it appears that any contributor, so this is a person who would make contributions or give contributions of money or goods or services to candidates in the municipal election, to determine if they've apparently exceeded the contribution limits under Section 88.9 of the Act. Section 88.9 of the Act sets out those contribution limits, and it says that a contributor can only contribute $1,200 to any one candidate, and their total cumulative contributions to candidates running for the same council cannot exceed $5,000. Next slide, please. There's a similar provision in the Act related to registered third-party advertisers. Under Section 88.35, that requires me to review the registered third-party advertisers' financial statements to determine if they appear to have contravened their contribution limits. And similar to candidates, the contribution limits for registered third parties are $1,200 to any one registered third party, or $5,000 to two or more registered third parties in the same municipality. Next slide, please. All candidates and registered third parties were required by the Municipal Act to file campaign financial statements using prescribed forms. Those are Form 4 for candidates or Form 8 for registered third parties. Those forms are prescribed by the Government of Ontario. Both forms required candidates and registered third parties to report the name, address, and contribution amounts for any contributor who contributed money and goods or services valued greater than $100. So that's $100.01 and up. Next slide, please. Using my broad authority under the Municipal Elections Act, I required all candidates and registered third-party advertisers to record the name, contribution amount, and addresses of their contributors using a set Excel spreadsheet, and an image of that appears on your screen and in the presentation. Next slide, please. And they were required to submit those electronically to my office when they filed their campaign financial statements. And they also attached those in most cases to their actual physical financial statement in lieu of actually using the provincial form for part of reporting contributors. Upon receipt of all those Excel spreadsheets of contributions, my staff in the Office of the Clerk compiled all the individual Excel worksheets into a master worksheet, which was then divided up by Richmond Hill Council, the different school boards, third-party advertisers. This was to ensure that we were following the rules in terms of determining if it appeared that a contributor had contravened those contribution rules, including the contribution rules that say maximum of $5,000 to more than one candidate running for council or the various local boards. I will state that we made obvious corrections in compiling that data in moving the information from the individual spreadsheets to the master spreadsheet. There were obvious errors where first names were in the last name field and last names were in the first name field. In order to properly search and understand those records, we made that obvious correction in copying the information over. And I will say that those master spreadsheets were then reviewed by myself, by various staff in my office, and also the city's finance department to determine if it appeared that a contributor had contravened the contribution rules. Based on that review, only one contributor has been identified as having apparently contravened the contribution limits, and only 2 candidates for election to Richmond Hill Council. In other words, we did not, or I certainly did not, determine that it appeared that anyone had contravened the contribution rules to any of the school board trustee candidates or to our registered third-party advertisers. Next slide, please. So before you today, of course, is my report on that one apparent over-contribution, and it relates to a Mr. Jason Captain. And it appeared based on the financial statements submitted by the candidates for Richmond Hill Council that Mr. Captain had contributed a total of $5,200 to 2 or more candidates running for Richmond Hill Council. And of course, that would exceed the $5,000 limit in Section 88.9 of the Act by a total of $200. And there on your screen, copied from the report to the committee, which is also part of the public agenda, is the extract from the master spreadsheet showing you the contributions that we questioned of whether it seemed to be an apparent over-contravention by $200. Now, I will say, as I said out of my report, that out of an abundance of caution and to ensure compliance with my obligations under the Act to report to this committee, I did assume that the Mr. Jason Captain listed on the spreadsheets was at 2 different addresses. So in other words, Mr. Captain was used both a Portland Street in Toronto and a Highway 7 address in Richmond Hill in making those contributions. Next slide, please. As a further background then, of course, as required by the Act, I did email a copy of that report that's before you and part of the public agenda to the committee on May 9th, 2023. I also sent a copy of that report with a hearing notice on May 9th to Mr. Captain at both addresses and also to each of the affected named candidates as shown on that previous slide. Next slide, please. And so we are here today to assist the committee in fulfilling its responsibility under subsection 88.348 of the Municipal Elections Act, which requires this committee to consider my report within 30 days and to decide whether to commence legal proceedings against a contributor for an apparent contravention of the contribution limits. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Thank you very much for your report, Mr. Huck. Are there any questions from committee members?
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the contributor present? I see no one here. And I see no witnesses.
Mr. Chair, may I address the absence
Please.
of the contributor or
Please.
the representative? Thank you. I just wanted to bring it to the committee and public's attention that the named contributor, Mr. Captain, through his legal counsel, had contacted my office, and of course, you have as part of the public agenda, Mr. Captain's correspondence, and they advised me that they would not be in attendance to address committee because they believe their written submissions spoke to all that needed to be spoken to. Thank you.
And similarly, the affected candidate and any witnesses are also not present for the record. We have received the written correspondence, specifically a correspondence brief from Peter Pratis, legal counsel for Jason Captain. Correspondence is dated May 23rd, 2023, which we have reviewed. There are no other comments or questions from the committee members. We would like to deliberate.
Chair, I guess for the record, I want to understand that obviously neither the candidate contributor is here. We did ask for a copy of the financial filings of the candidate. We have reviewed those. We found nothing that would indicate an additional $200 more than the candidate, or sorry, the contributor said that he had given and showed us his check blank, or that had been returned check. I take it, Mr. Chair, through you to the clerk's department, no contact was made with the candidate to see if they might be able to explain the discrepancy of reported $1,200 contribution versus $1,000 return check.
Through the chair, the affected candidates, all of them, including, and if I might, the one that the member of the committee is referring to, the Mr. Pirelli, were certainly notified of this meeting today. They were provided a copy of the agenda for this meeting by email with Mr. Pratis's correspondence attached there too. I certainly can only say that my office has not heard back from any of the affected candidates for any reason whatsoever.
Please clarify, given that this is a hybrid hearing, if anyone is participating remotely, are they given an opportunity to make submissions?
Thank you to the chair. As part of my notice to the candidates, they were, and also the contributor, they were given the option of appearing electronically. We did require pre-registration for that purpose because we have to be able to send out credentials. They were requested to notify us by last Thursday, whatever, I believe that was June 1st or June 2nd, by email if they needed to appear electronically. We have not heard from any of those candidates. We have rechecked, just operationally, we use two different email addresses related to elections, as well as my own address or Mr. Band, the secretary for this meetings. And no one has heard back from any of the affected candidates in response to that notice.
Thank you, Mr. Huck. Are there any other questions from committee members before we deliberate?
Nothing from me. Thank
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Deliberation, please. Private.
I'll make the motion then that the committee recess, adjourn, whatever term you want, into private session.
I'll second.